we're gonna go over one of the, if not the absolute craziest explosive expression of human capability, and we're gonna start right now. All right, so I like to think about what are the most explosive things that athletes can do or that human beings can do. And when I think about this, a couple different sports come to mind, right? We want to think about, actually immediately I think about Simone Biles when she was wearing like jeans and stuff, and she just does like that triple backflip twist on a baseball mound, barely even warmed up. Like, to me, that's ungodly amount of power and explosiveness. So I start to think about it even further. Okay, basketball players jumping all of the time with their body weight, their size. Football players coming off the line when they're jumping for balls as well, doing things like that. But then also just non-obstructed, similar things to the Biles scenarios. You're looking at somebody like a long jumper or a high jumper, other gymnastics exercises or movements, running the 100, pole vault. These are all just phenomenally explosive-based movement patterns that require, obviously in gymnastics, that requires a ton of technique, but things like the long jump, high jump, there's a very, very technical movement involved, but it's not as technical as, say, a weightlifting exercise or as something that gymnasts are going to be doing. Gymnastics in general, I would say, are extraordinarily technical. So that brings us to this unbelievable feat. And this goes all the way back to 1968. The Olympics were taking place in Mexico City. My collegiate track coach, Harry Groves, was the Team USA, one of the Team USA coaches, and was fortunate enough to be neighboring to an individual named Bob Beamon. And now Bob Beamon was known to be just total absolute freak. He did do some of the sprints. He was also a long jumper, and he was one of the favorites to potentially win the Olympic gold. And so Coach Groves would always tell the story that this guy was just an absolute animal, the nicest guy on the planet. He also really liked women, specifically the night before major competitions, but just approached competition like a true professional with his routine, with his rituals. And so I wanted to break down what I think is one of the absolute craziest things to have ever happened in athletics, and also likely, the fact that his Olympic record still stands today from 1968 is just absolutely freaking incredible. So we're gonna go in. I want to show you guys this actual jump that he broke. So he broke the previous world record by 21 inches. And on top of that, this is still the second longest jump that is wind legal. So in the long jump, wind will give you a little bit more of a push depending on where it's coming from. And there has been one other jump that is longer than what Beamon did and what Michael Powell, who ended up breaking Bob Beamon's world record, but it was not wind legal. So the world record didn't hold. So as far as wind legal jumps, this is the second longest jump in the history of the world, and it's from 1968. So let's check this out again. And I think that when we're looking at something like the long jump, we've got to realize too, there's a lot of speed involved, there's a lot of technique, and there's so much force, so much energy that comes off of the board, okay, after you plant. And then as you're landing, you've got to think about how much of that goes into what are you doing in the air? How can you control your legs so that you can go as long as possible? How can you use that trunk control? How can we understand all these different concepts? So here we go. This is probably the best. And I think what's really, really impressive there when you watch him run, how well, he does have like a little bit of like this herky-jerky position as he's running, but then when he's approaching, he just gets a little flexion in his right hip. I want to go back and show that. If we analyze this, like right here, he gets that little load on that right side, just a little bit. So it goes boom, boom, boom. Right here, you can see he starts to load up. I want to show right here. He starts to load up in that hip. And I think Franz Bosch talks about this. This is what he would refer to as like that hip lock. This is when everything around that hip position, and including his gut, his trunk, is really starting to light up, and everything's starting to co-contract, so that as he plants at this absurd speed, he's able to come out of that position as aggressively as possible. Okay, so he gets that plant position. Okay, he extends that right hip, and then he's driving that left knee really, really hard. Okay, so he's getting into that flex position there. And if you've watched some of our weightlifting exercises or weightlifting comprehension, or where we talk about the catch position, I think the catch position, getting into that fold, compressing, and having controlled compression is really, really key. Now, it is bilateral, so that's something that we have to keep in mind. But now, watching this jump, okay, really extends into his back and then gets tremendous flexion, reaches. Like, that's pretty good freaking mobility. Look how shredded his hamstrings are. So let's go back. I just want to share this in the beginning here. This is the first one that we can see full speed. And so if we can think about this jump was 890, so I think it's like 29.5 feet. Okay, 29 feet 5 inches. If we just put things in perspective, he beat the previous world record by almost 2 feet. Okay, so about 65 centimeters. Yeah, about 65 centimeters. And when we can think about what that means for a movement pattern like a long jump, okay, so 890, 29.5, and beating 29.5 by 2 feet, the relative improvement is insane. Okay, so let's go back to what we're looking at here. And I think it's important for us to just recognize, and why I wanted to bring this up is, it's a feat of strength, it's a feat of power, it's a feat of speed, and it's something where if we can look back at these crazy accomplishments, someone who was as talented as Bob Beamon and didn't have access to the crazy science that we have access to today, didn't have access to velocity-based training, didn't have access to what should we be doing with resistance-based training. I think it proves out that there is some credence to intuition, and intuition of training, and intuition of peaking and things along those lines, because someone like Bob Beamon didn't have access to journals upon journals of strength and conditioning to tell him, or to tell his coaches what he needed to be doing exactly. And I've even I've been fortunate enough to even watch someone like John Carlos, another really famous athlete in the world of athletics, and John Carlos would even talk about that. As far as their training was concerned, everything was more so based around intuition and how their body felt, almost like a more advanced auto-regulation. Okay, and I think that that's some things that, as we've made progress with technology, we still lose that auto-regulation. Like, we're losing that. That's getting lost in the sauce of metrics and data and information from robots that don't know how people actually feel. So we just need to be careful with that, and that's why I wanted to break this down. And like his speed on the runway, like right there, I even think if we can analyze the flexion there, what's happening with the knee coming through, where his heel height is on his left foot as he's approaching, and how that flexion then transfers into this massive jump. See, right as he's about to hit it, he lengthens right, boom, to be able to handle the incredible amount of force here that happens when he comes off of the board. Now, one thing too we do have to bring up is, like, a lot of people, well, he was jumping at altitude in Mexico City, it's a little bit higher. But my understanding is that from Coach Groves is that he also had some issues of, Montezuma's revenge. That was another issue that I have heard, which is also incredible that he was able to do this. So when we're looking at it, and one, just the absolute, man, just watch him run, man, he's just so fluid. Everything's so fluid. Everything's incredible, and no one really knew. So he was in such good form, and the jump was so long that it was like 15 minutes to figure out how long it was, because the measurement tools weren't accurate. And they needed to figure out, okay, what did he actually end up jumping? And what does that mean for the sport? I think he ended up winning by like 3+ feet, but I just revisiting this, we've seen, you know, the pole vault world record get broken. We've seen the 100-meter world record get broken multiple times by Usain Bolt. We've seen the 200-meter world record get broken. We've even seen, you know, where now Arian Knighton is coming up and he might be someone that can even break Usain Bolt's world record. There's been discussions that even Flojo's world record's about to be broken. And outside of the women's 800 meters, this jump to me is probably the most impressive physical feat by any human being ever. And so if we can analyze what he did, understand what he did, I even think I would look for some type of physical breakdown of what was the speed that he was carrying on the runway, what was the force that was being exerted when he planted, can we understand what his body weight was? And then again, I think we should be talking to him, talking to Bob Beamon as much as possible and trying to really connect all these things, because it's still the second longest fair jump of all time. It's still the Olympic record, and it very likely is going to stand for another 20 years plus. It doesn't look like anytime soon someone's going to be jumping 890, and that is why I believe that that jump might be the craziest feat possibly in the history of the world across all sports. So if you guys have any other crazy feats of what you think could be challenging Bob Beamon's crazy jump and that expression of power, that expression of speed, comment down below. Let me know what you would like to hear from us and how we can break that down so that we can help you guys attain that peak strength. If you need help with your overall programming, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store, the Apple iOS Store. You can download our app, Peak Strength, to help you on that strength training journey. Until next time, guys, peace.